Which one? Just gonna put these down. Should be in one of them. Get looking. I've been looking for this.
Outsiders have always been fascinated by the hidden codes and unwritten rules that quietly govern Hollywood, but the unfolding situation surrounding Rachel Zegler provides a rare and almost textbook example of how the industry enforces those rules against people it labels as difficult. What makes the whole ordeal sting is the way it feels both personal and impersonal at the same time, insulting in the sense that when you're simply going about ordinary life, trying to handle the small daily routines that ground you, you begin to realize that certain people don't actually care about you as an individual. They don't care about your character, your personality, or even your work ethic. What they care about is that you exist in a way that disrupts their carefully managed image of control, and that single fact is enough to make you a liability. That seems to be the perception Zegler is now facing, because whispers across the industry have grown into something louder. Her name has quietly vanished from press conferences, red carpet lineups, and guest lists that she was once expected to headline. It isn't just one or two casual cancellations either. It's a growing recognition inside studio walls that she is someone executives do not want to be associated with right now, someone who is to be quietly shuffled out of sight. This is not a matter of small cliques or a few disgruntled producers. What's emerging is an entire ecosystem of blacklisting that stretches into Hollywood's most influential spaces. It includes the massive promotional circuits tied to summer blockbusters, the early red carpet season where nominations begin to form, and the private mixers and networking events that often decide who gets cast in the next big franchise and who quietly fades from relevance. To be absent from these places is more than a scheduling change, it is a signal of erasure, a message to peers and rivals alike that someone is no longer a viable part of the game. The cruel irony is that these rumors began to swirl right at the point when Rachel Zegler should have been celebrating her moment of victory. She had been given the lead role in Evita, a project many expected to revive her career and restore her reputation. What should have been a triumphant return ended up functioning as the exact opposite, the catalyst for a near-total freeze in her professional standing. Instead of breathing new life into her career, the role seems to have marked the beginning of a silent but decisive industry shutdown. Insiders, who normally hedge their words with caution, have not been vague this time. The language they use is blunt, almost ruthless. She is not welcome. Not at this premiere, not at this festival, not in this moment, and, depending on how things unfold, possibly not for years. What makes the story even more intriguing is that this process of exclusion appeared to begin before Evita had even stumbled at the box office. Reports suggest that during early preparations for promotional events, some studio executives were already debating whether to remove her from lineups, quietly signaling discomfort long before the project collapsed. Whatever unfolded on the set, conflicts, disagreements, or unspoken scandals, seems to have pushed things into overdrive, accelerating a situation that was already brewing in closed-door meetings. Perhaps the clearest evidence of this industrial rejection lies not in the words of executives but in Zegler's own uncharacteristic silence. She was once known for being outspoken, sharp, and quick to fire back at criticism with cryptic interviews or rebellious social media posts, but now there is only quiet. Her platforms, once buzzing with activity, sit still, offering no clues and no resistance. That absence of voice carries a heavy meaning, as if even her team cannot find a viable strategy to counter the swift decline in her industry standing. It suggests not only a fall from grace but also a paralysis within her inner circle, a recognition that the usual defenses no longer work when an entire system has quietly decided to look away. The silence, in this case, speaks louder than any denial, confirming that the machinery of Hollywood has moved on without her. At least for now, details about the alleged backstage turmoil that unfolded during Evita rehearsals are gradually surfacing, and together they sketch the portrait of a production that seemed plagued by friction from the very beginning. Accounts suggest that what should have been an exciting creative process quickly dissolved into a tense and combative atmosphere once Rachel Zegler entered the room. According to multiple insiders, issues began almost immediately after the first table read, when Zegler openly challenged the director's interpretation of the script. What was supposed to be a routine read-through soon became a sparring match, with Zegler questioning choices in tone, pacing, and delivery. The situation worsened when she clashed with the voice coaches, sometimes in front of the entire cast, and even attempted to alter scripted lines on her own initiative. For some, it was a show of confidence. For others, it was disruptive insubordination. One crew member remarked that rehearsals began to feel less like a collaborative space and more like a rolling crisis management session. Another production assistant described the tension as walking on eggshells every single day, with people constantly bracing for the next blow-up. As rehearsals dragged on, the atmosphere reportedly grew so strained that staff members adopted dark humor as a coping mechanism, nicknaming the production the circus. At least one singer stormed off stage mid-rehearsal, announcing that the project was not worth the mounting stress. Perhaps the most damaging story involves a heated confrontation between Zegler and a seasoned Broadway performer, an argument said to have been so loud it reverberated throughout the rehearsal building. That performer, a respected figure with decades of experience, allegedly packed up and left for good that very day. Since then, their absence has been glaring, with their name scrubbed from all promotional material, a silence that raises more questions than it answers. What makes the fallout striking is the way Hollywood appears to be moving in lockstep, without ever making formal announcements. No studio press release has explained the disappearances. No official statements have addressed the walkouts. Yet the collective industry response has been as coordinated as it has been quiet, a subtle but powerful retreat, a turning of backs without a single word spoken publicly. Behind the scenes, however, the ripple effects have been unmistakable. Zegler was slated for a high-profile fitting with a luxury fashion house in preparation for a red carpet gala, but the appointment was abruptly cancelled without explanation. She was expected to attend a promotional banquet for a major ensemble film, but when the night arrived, she was missing entirely. Her co-stars and the director were there, smiling for cameras, answering questions, shaping the narrative, but Zegler's absence was not even acknowledged. In Hollywood, silence often says more than scandal, and in this case the lack of her presence screamed volumes. The industry's handling of the situation breaks sharply from its usual playbook. Traditionally, when a star falls into controversy, the machinery of Hollywood shifts quickly into reputation repair mode. There are contrite interviews in glossy magazines, carefully staged moments of vulnerability in late-night talk shows, and symbolic public appearances that signal resilience and rebirth. Often, there is even a glamorous photo shoot designed to visually reinforce the idea of a comeback. In Zegler's case, none of this has happened. There has been no strategic reset, no staged apology, no controlled attempt at narrative recovery. Instead, the problem ballooned far beyond the world of theater gossip and spilled into the larger Hollywood conversation before her team could formulate a defense. The speed of that spread caught her camp by surprise, leaving them scrambling for options while the broader industry quietly but firmly distanced itself from her. Insiders now speak of her in terms usually reserved for liabilities, not stars. One source described her as a walking danger, claiming that publicists are actively advising their clients to avoid being associated with her. That is not mere caution, it is a form of quiet exile. The absence of her name from events and guest lists is not random scheduling, it is the deliberate machinery of exclusion at work. According to several accounts, at least 2 major studios began internal discussions about cutting ties with her as soon as reports of Evita's backstage drama hit the press. Invitations that had already been extended were rescinded almost overnight. Publicists stopped pushing her for panels, networking events, and media opportunities. One source even suggested that scripts she had been considered for were quietly reassigned to other performers within days. Perhaps the most telling sign of all comes from the words of a studio executive, who allegedly told his staff in unambiguous terms, "We can't afford another headline. She's too erratic." That single sentence captures the calculation at the heart of the matter. Hollywood is not just concerned with artistry or performance, it is a business that thrives on predictability, image management, and risk control. When a performer crosses the invisible line between difficult and unmanageable, the system responds not with confrontation but with quiet erasure. Careers in this town are often not ended with a bang but with the simple fact of not being invited, not being mentioned, not being seen. For Rachel Zegler, the whispers, the cancellations, and the missing invitations all point to one chilling conclusion. The machine has already moved on, And it may be a very long time before it even considers circling back. Zegler's actions are no longer being brushed aside as minor incidents or forgiven as the eccentric habits of an ambitious young star. In the hypersensitive, image-driven culture of modern Hollywood, they are being interpreted as something far more dangerous, almost like a reputational contagion that others in the industry must avoid at all costs. In an environment where perception is often more powerful than reality, her controversies are treated less as isolated missteps and more as a kind of infection that could spread to anyone too closely associated with her. As a result, actors, producers, directors, stylists, and even agents are going to extraordinary lengths to ensure that their clients, their companies, and their brands remain as far away from her as possible. What is unfolding is not an official, written blacklisting with clear declarations or contractual bans, but something in many ways far more suffocating. A slow, calculated distancing, a strategic withdrawal of opportunity, attention, and visibility that can stall a career without ever requiring an official announcement. The pattern is already visible in the way events are being handled. Take, for instance, a significant summer press junket where Zegler had originally been listed as one of the primary names on the call sheet. 4 weeks, her participation had been expected, interviews were scheduled, press kits included her image, and publicity assistants had already drafted promotional talking points. Then, less than 48 hours before the event was set to begin, her name was abruptly removed. No one addressed the change. No official explanation was given. She simply vanished from the lineup, replaced by others, leaving reporters to quietly note her absence without any comment from organizers. The same scenario played out again soon afterward when she was scheduled to appear in a talent showcase at a prestigious streaming conference. Once again, she was announced, once again preparations were made, and once again she was quietly erased before the public could notice, her name gone from promotional materials as though she had never been attached at all. This pattern of erasure is perhaps most striking in the digital sphere, where silence often speaks louder than condemnation. Studio accounts that once eagerly promoted her projects, tagged her posts, and amplified her presence have now gone cold, offering no acknowledgement of her work. Where there was once enthusiasm, retweets, celebratory captions, highlight reels, there is now nothing but a void. Former castmates who only a short time ago posted supportive photos and uplifting messages have stopped interacting entirely, their sudden disengagement as conspicuous as any tabloid headline. According to insiders, the cast of her upcoming ensemble film has even been specifically instructed not to bring her up in interviews or posts. One press agent allegedly told a client, in blunt terms, that they were not touching that mess, instructing the actor to avoid even casual acknowledgement of Zegler's involvement. The absence has become glaring in other ways as well. A filmmaker who once called her the future of cinema has not liked or commented on any of her social media posts for more than a month, a silence that feels deliberate in a business where online engagement functions as a form of informal currency. Producers who once name-dropped her in interviews no longer mention her at all. Stylists and industry influencers who once celebrated her looks on red carpets have simply moved on, shifting their attention to other stars with fewer risks attached. This silent withdrawal is not accidental, it is systematic, a form of reputational quarantine that makes it clear to anyone watching that she has become untouchable. Even charitable spaces, which often provide a refuge for troubled stars to rebuild their image, have quietly closed their doors. Zegler had been scheduled to appear at a high-profile charity banquet for a project she had publicly supported in the past. The event went ahead as planned, the celebrities arrived in glittering gowns, speeches were made, photos circulated widely, but Zegler was nowhere to be found. Her absence was not explained, not even acknowledged with the polite phrase, "Wish you were here." The organizers simply acted as though she had never been part of the program at all, erasing her presence so thoroughly that only those who knew she had once been on the guest list understood the significance. In Hollywood, this kind of silence is rarely accidental. Every ignored post, every missing tag, every cancelled appearance builds into a larger story that is communicated without a single press release. What is happening to Zegler is more chilling than a scandal splashed across tabloids, because it is not about public shaming, it is about disappearance. Careers here are often not ended by dramatic collapses but by this quieter, more calculated process. being left out of the photos, being cut from the schedules, being written out of the conversation until you simply fade from the narrative. And that is exactly what appears to be happening now. Rachel Zegler is not being loudly condemned, but she is being carefully removed, step by step, from the very ecosystem that once embraced her, until the silence around her name is more powerful than any headline. What is happening now suggests that the industry's response is not simply about the Evita problem, but rather about a larger pattern of behavior that has been troubling decision-makers for some time. Executives and insiders appear to see her recent controversies as part of a broader history, not a one-off misstep. The online reaction has been just as complicated, heated, and deeply divided. One viral tweet, which has already collected more than 100,000 likes, summarized the mood with blunt finality: "This was coming. Before someone quits constructing bridges for you, you can only burn so many of them." For many viewers, the sentiment captured a sense of inevitability, as though the industry was bound to catch up with her sooner or later. At the same time, a vocal contingent of supporters has rallied to her defense, arguing that she is being unfairly punished for behavior that male actors often get away with. As one TikTok user, whose video has been watched over 2 million times, noted with biting irony, if she were a guy, they'd be calling her method.
This and I'm like, what did I say? But there's like an audio cut and like a video cut, but I say después de un año sin trabajo.
Ecosystem. Instead, the fallout spread like wildfire, fueled by social media algorithms, gossip accounts with millions of followers, and digital commentators hungry for drama. By the time her team realized the story had become a mainstream fixation, it was already trending globally, with hashtags dissecting her behavior and memes turning her into a shorthand for Hollywood arrogance. The first 48 hours are everything, one PR strategist admitted privately. If you lose control of the opening narrative, you may never get it back. In Zegler's case, they weren't just late to the game, they didn't even realize the game had started. This debate has spilled into every corner of the internet. Reddit threads, fan forums, and anonymous industry tip accounts are not debating if she is in trouble, they are asking why it took so long for Hollywood to respond. The silence from the studios has only deepened the speculation. And while the online chatter may feel abstract, the fallout has already had real-world consequences. According to multiple sources, 2 of the 4 major projects Zegler was previously attached to have now been placed on hold. These projects have not been cancelled outright, but they are cooling, as one insider put it, which in Hollywood is often a polite way of saying that a studio is waiting to see if the storm will pass before making permanent decisions. The hesitation highlights the risks tied to her name. Even for the projects still moving forward, significant obstacles remain. Studios are asking hard questions. Will fans still show up to see her? Will her co-stars willingly promote alongside her, or will they distance themselves to protect their own reputations? Will press tours become minefields of awkward questions that publicists cannot control? The answers to these questions may determine not only the fate of her current work but also whether she will continue to be seen as marketable in the years ahead. Zegler's predicament also illustrates how precarious stardom has become in the current climate of post-strike Hollywood, where budgets are tight, margins are thin, and public opinion carries more weight than ever before. Her case is being held up by some as an example of how quickly a rising star can find themselves in dangerous territory, not just because of a single controversy but because of the way that controversy reshapes perceptions of reliability and bankability. In an industry where dependability is currency, even a hint of unpredictability can make executives flinch. And the damage is not confined to film sets or casting offices. Outside of her professional commitments, brand partnerships and fashion collaborations have reportedly begun to slip away. According to one report, a mid-tier fashion label that had once proudly dressed Zegler for red carpets has now shifted its focus to younger, less controversial rising stars, quietly ending a relationship that had helped shape her public image. Stylists who had once courted her business are said to be declining calls, preferring clients who offer safer returns. One stylist even tweeted a cryptic remark, "No one wants a return on chaos," which insiders immediately interpreted as a reference to her without needing to mention her name directly. What makes the entire situation even more peculiar is the total absence of any coordinated damage control. Typically, when a star falls under this kind of scrutiny, their team moves swiftly to manage the crisis, releasing carefully worded statements, booking sympathetic interviews, and rolling out staged public appearances designed to reframe the narrative. In this case, however, nothing of the sort has appeared. There has been no heartfelt sit-down interview, no carefully curated social media apology, no glossy photoshoot symbolizing resilience. The silence, both from her camp and from the studios that once promoted her so heavily, has become its own story. It suggests either paralysis within her team or a recognition that the usual strategies will no longer work. And in Hollywood, where perception is everything, that absence of a counter-narrative is often more damaging than the controversy itself. Generally speaking, crisis PR in Hollywood has always followed a well-established formula, one that is practically engraved in the industry's DNA. When a scandal erupts, the sequence is usually predictable. Acknowledge the issue before rumors grow too loud, issue a carefully written apology or statement of clarification, demonstrate tangible progress, sometimes through charity work, mentorship programs, or personal wellness retreats, and then gradually rebuild through strategically planned interviews, glossy magazine profiles, or sympathetic late-night appearances. The goal is never perfection but survival. Stars who play the game correctly often re-emerge stronger, sometimes even earning admiration for their resilience. Yet Rachel Zegler's case appears to defy that tradition. Weeks into her professional freeze-out, none of the familiar moves have been deployed. There are no signs of a forthcoming redemption interview in a trusted outlet like Vanity Fair or The Hollywood Reporter. There is no calculated return to Instagram or TikTok with a carefully curated post meant to signal self-awareness and growth. There has been no speech at an award show acknowledging lessons learned. There has been nothing at all, only a silence that has grown more uncomfortable with each passing day. And in an industry where silence can be fatal, the void is beginning to feel like a verdict. Insiders say this vacuum of response wasn't entirely intentional. According to an executive with ties to one of the major talent agencies, Zegler's representatives were blindsided by the speed with which the Evita controversy leapt beyond its expected boundaries. They assumed it would remain largely confined to theater circles, maybe debated among critics or whispered about in casting rooms, but unlikely to spill into the wider entertainment. The result has been a frantic scramble behind the scenes, one that has yielded few tangible results. A public relations assistant who works in event planning said her team has been pitching her for every kind of non-acting platform imaginable: Women in Hollywood panels, diversity and inclusion summits, charity events, even light-hearted talk show segments designed to remind the public that she's human. These are the classic ways to reframe an image, to turn the conversation from scandal toward resilience. Yet time and again, they've been turned down. Brands that once courted her for campaigns now describe her as too risky. Streaming platforms that previously invited her to represent them at conferences are quietly removing her name from rosters. Even unpaid charity galas, usually a safe haven for troubled stars to show goodwill, are reportedly debating whether her presence would overshadow the cause. This is a level of rejection usually reserved for celebrities facing legal indictments, not for an actress dealing with a reputation crisis. The contrast is striking when compared to past Hollywood scandals. Stars like Robert Downey Jr., Winona Ryder, and Drew Barrymore all endured highly publicized lows, yet were given paths back through PR roadmaps and industry forgiveness. Even Shia LaBeouf, despite far more severe allegations, managed to maintain working relationships for years by leaning on the standard cycle of apologies and comebacks. Zegler, however, seems to have been denied even the first rung of that ladder. Instead of a controlled fall followed by rehabilitation, she has been allowed to plummet unchecked, the machinery of Hollywood crisis management turning its back on her as though she is no longer worth the investment. Her own silence only deepens the perception of isolation. For years, Zegler was known as a hyperactive digital presence, posting quirky selfies, cryptic quotes, and playful exchanges with fans. Her accounts weren't just marketing tools. They were part of her identity, a direct connection with a young fanbase that saw her as refreshingly unpolished. Now, those platforms are dormant. No new photos, no witty remarks, no retweets or reposts. For a star who once treated social media as an extension of her personality, the silence is deafening. Fans interpret it in different ways. Some believe she is regrouping, taking time to reflect before re-emerging stronger, while others suspect she has been ordered into silence by handlers terrified that a single impulsive post could reignite the controversy. Either way, the vacuum has been filled by speculation, with others controlling her narrative in her absence. Gossip accounts, Reddit threads, and TikTok commentators have seized the spotlight, shaping perceptions while she remains voiceless. Perhaps most damning is the response, or rather, the non-response, of the studios still tied to her projects. In situations like these, it is common to see at least a lukewarm gesture of support. A producer might issue a generic statement praising her talent while vaguely acknowledging the challenges. A studio executive might stress that they remain confident in the film. Even the faintest signal of solidarity can act as a lifeline. Yet in Zegler's case, not a single studio has offered even that. Instead, there has been a chilling silence, as though the industry has already made its judgment and chosen to distance itself completely. The absence of even perfunctory defenses suggests that executives view her as more than a temporary liability. They see her as a long-term risk to both box office potential and brand partnerships. Put together, the picture is bleak. What began as a mishandled scandal has metastasized into something closer to an industry-wide freeze-out, with Zegler left in a kind of professional purgatory. In the past, Hollywood was notorious for granting second, third, even fourth chances to stars who played by the rules of contrition. But in this new post-strike, post-pandemic environment, where budgets are tighter, social media magnifies every misstep, and public opinion has become both volatile and unforgiving, the margin for error has shrunk dramatically. Zegler's silence, her team's slow reaction, and the industry's collective decision to distance itself have combined to create a crisis that feels less like a stumble and more like a free fall. Unless something dramatic changes, her case may become a cautionary tale for the next generation of rising stars. In today's Hollywood, losing control of the narrative isn't just a setback, it can be the end of the story. Whether Rachel Zegler is experiencing a career setback is no longer in doubt. The evidence of professional decline is all around her. What remains uncertain, and what the industry now debates in hushed conversations, is whether this moment represents a temporary misstep, the kind from which even the most beleaguered stars can recover, or a permanent rupture in her trajectory that could alter the course of her career forever. Hollywood, after all, is a place that both chews up talent and resurrects it. For every star whose downfall is final, there are others who reinvent themselves through the very machinery that once shunned them. The city thrives as much on stories of reinvention as on tales of discovery. It is not impossible to imagine this turbulent period later being reframed as the dark chapter that sets the stage for an extraordinary comeback. But comebacks are not automatic. They require timing, humility, and the willingness to rebuild trust. And right now, as weeks of silence pile up, Zegler's chance to reclaim the narrative appears to be narrowing. She stands at what can only be described as a pivotal crossroads, a moment that will likely decide whether she becomes a cautionary tale about the perils of stardom or the protagonist of a redemption arc celebrated in future magazine covers and award show montages. Hollywood history is filled with both types. Robert Downey Jr., after years of scandal, became the face of one of the most successful film franchises in history. Winona Ryder, once virtually blacklisted, re-emerged decades later as a nostalgic icon in Stranger Things. On the other hand, countless names once touted as the next big thing vanished quietly after controversies or missteps, their promise reduced to footnotes in entertainment lore. For Zegler, the danger lies in becoming the latter, remembered more for squandered potential than for realized achievement. The harsh truth is that the entertainment industry rarely rewards talent alone. Talent may ignite a career, but longevity is sustained by dependability, marketability, and professional ties. Relationships with directors, producers, agents, and co-stars form the invisible scaffolding that keeps an actor working even through rocky periods. If those bonds weaken, opportunities vanish quickly. Studios and networks operate under an unforgiving logic. Every decision is weighed in terms of risk and return. If a performer is deemed too unpredictable, the calculus shifts. A project may survive without one actor, but few projects can survive when controversy overshadows the work itself. In this climate, Zegler's silence, combined with the industry's growing distance, threatens to solidify perceptions of unreliability. The contrast with her earlier promise only makes her predicament sharper. Barely 2 years ago, she was being hailed as a generational talent, a performer with the rare combination of youth, charisma, and range that could anchor major franchises while also excelling in prestige projects. Interviews described her as the future of Hollywood, and studios rushed to align themselves with her rising star. She seemed to embody the industry's hunger for fresh faces who could connect with both younger audiences online and traditional moviegoers in theaters. But momentum in Hollywood is fragile. What once looked like limitless potential now feels like a fragile edifice on the verge of collapse. Reports of tension on sets, quiet removals from promotional lineups, and the eerie silence of former collaborators all feed into the perception of a career unraveling in real time. Her situation highlights the volatile nature of modern celebrity, where the rise and fall of reputations is accelerated by social media. In an earlier era, a troubled star might have had months, or even years, to regroup, shielded by controlled press coverage and the slower rhythms of print media. Today, narratives are shaped in real time by online discourse. A rumor can go viral in hours, shaping public perception before a publicist even drafts a response. In such an environment, silence is not neutral. It becomes a statement in itself, often interpreted as avoidance, arrogance, or evidence of deeper issues. Each day Zegler remains absent from the conversation allows others to define her story for her. And yet, the possibility of a comeback cannot be dismissed. Hollywood is mercurial, capable of freezing out a star one moment and embracing them the next if the circumstances align. But comebacks require more than time. They require a clear demonstration of growth. Downey Jr.'s resurgence was aided not only by his undeniable talent but also by years of personal rehabilitation that convinced studios he could be trusted again. Drew Barrymore transformed from a child star in crisis to a beloved talk show host by embracing vulnerability and persistence. For Zegler, the road back would likely demand a combination of humility, consistent professionalism, and perhaps a project daring enough to remind the world of her talent while overshadowing the noise. Still, the odds are formidable. Industry insiders whisper that the longer the silence continues, the less likely it is that bridges can be rebuilt. In Hollywood, absence does not make the heart grow fonder, it makes executives forgetful. Casting directors move on to other names. Fashion houses pivot to fresher faces. Directors hesitate to attach themselves to potential PR disasters. Even fans, once fiercely loyal, drift toward the next rising star who seems more reliable. For a business built on image, absence is almost indistinguishable from irrelevance. And so the central question remains unresolved. Will Rachel Zegler find a way to claw back her place in Hollywood, transforming this dark chapter into the foundation of a comeback story? Or is the industry's collective cold shoulder a sign that her retreat is already being written into the record? Is this the setup for an eventual redemption montage, or are we watching a career unravel before our eyes? The stakes are high because the answer will define not only her career but also how Hollywood handles young stars moving forward. One lesson, however, is already clear. In this business, connections and skill may be equally valued, but when reputations are on the line, connections often carry more weight. The most promising careers can be derailed when the industry decides a star is more trouble than they are worth. Zegler's situation is a stark reminder of the ruthless economics of reputation, where yesterday's rising star can become today's liability with startling speed. And unless she finds a way to reset the narrative soon, her story may not be remembered as one of redemption, but as one of caution, the latest reminder that in Hollywood, talent alone is never enough to survive.